Hello, and thank you for joining this live webinar presented by the Cisco Learning Network. This webinar will be recorded and made available on the Cisco Learning Network, and information on how to access the recording will be emailed to you following the live session. Please allow up to 5 business days for the full recording to be made available. Thank you very much and enjoy the presentation. Hello, and thank you for joining this live webinar presented by the Cisco Learning Network. This webinar will be recorded and made available on the Cisco Learning Network, and information on how to access the recording will be emailed to you following the live session. Please allow up to 5 business days for the full recording to be made available. Thank you very much and enjoy the presentation. Hello, and thank you for joining this live webinar presented by the Cisco Learning Network. This webinar will be recorded and made available on the Cisco Learning Network, and information on how to access the recording will be emailed to you following the live session. Please allow up to 5 business days for the full recording to be made available. Thank you very much and enjoy the presentation.
This meeting is being recorded.
Hello, everyone. Good morning or good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Rigo Villa. I am one of the community managers on the Cisco Learning Network, and I'll be your host today. In this session, we're going to be diving into how to get data out of ISE with our speaker and presenter, Thomas Howard. But before we get started, I wanted to share a couple of quick housekeeping notes. First, I do want to let our attendees know that if we run into any technical issues during the webinar, we're going to do our very best to resolve it as soon as possible. So we just want to thank you in advance for your patience and understanding. Next, if you have any questions during the session, we ask that you please post them in the question and answer panel, as that would help our panelists manage to keep track of all of the questions and would also allow them to provide you with a much more timely response. Also, if you experience any audio streaming issues during the live presentation, I do recommend using the call-in telephone number that I'm going to be posting in the chat window here in just a moment. And at the end of this webinar, you're going to get a pop-up survey with a couple of questions about today's presentation. And we would really appreciate it if you can just take a moment to fill it out and share with us any thoughts or feedback that you may have about today's session. I also want to let our attendees know that this session will be recorded and will be available on demand within approximately 5 business days after today. And I'll be sharing some more information about that in the chat window a little bit later on. And last but not least, I want to let everyone know about our upcoming ISE webinar. So next month, we are going to be covering ISE Posture Compliance Part 1, and that's going to be on Tuesday, May 7th. I'm going to be sharing some information in the chat window on how you can register for this session a little bit later on as well. And without any further delay, I am now going to turn it over to our speaker to get us started. So Thomas, if you're ready, please take it away.
Yeah, thank you, Rigo. Hey, everybody. I just wanted to also remind you that we're going to be talking about what's new in ISE 3.4 coming up in June after Cisco Live. So tune into that webinar if you want to learn what's coming. Very basic beginner with CSV files to very advanced Python scripts. So hold on to your seatbelts because it's gonna go all over the place really fast, and we'll see how quickly I can get through all this stuff for you guys today. Uh, I really wanted to cover this topic because there are so many different ways to get data out of ICE. Probably the first and easiest is using CSV files or comma separated values. I think a lot of you should be familiar with these already. Uh, and so this is why it's a good, easy introduction to get data in and out of ICE. But sometimes, especially with endpoints, you don't get everything you need out of the ICE GUI, and it's necessary to go run a CLI command called application configure ICE. We're going to go show you what that looks like, how it works, and why you want it sometimes. Of course, there's always good old-fashioned Syslogs, right? We always want to be able to have a long audit trail, archive those things off, put them into SIMs, monitor things, monitor events. So, of course, you have the ability to use Syslogs with ICE as well. REST is really one of the really cool ways of doing things. I've done things, so we're going to show you how to do some more of those things today. We also have pxGrid, the platform exchange grid from Cisco. This is more interesting because it allows you to get data asynchronously rather than trying to pull APIs. It actually sends it to you as things happen event-wise, so that's really cool. And then we have something new as of ICE 3.2 called Data Connect, which allows you to basically use an ODBC client to connect directly to the ICE database. And it won't let you change anything, but it will let you read these database tables. And this allows you to do some very powerful database queries so that you can query the data inside of ICE and make your own custom reports without any limitations imposed by the existing PDF static reports inside of ICE. So this is kind of all the different things we're going to cover. And just as a kind of an overview, I wanted to go over this as well. I know there's a lot of stuff here, but it's a really nice comparison once you start drilling down into things. And this is kind of how I like to break it up. If you look at it this way, usually whenever you're importing and exporting CSVs, you're doing about what's in the configuration. You're configuring endpoints and identity groups and network devices, things like that. You also have the ability to get endpoint data out via CLI. The other thing you can do is we talked about Syslogs and pxGrid. This basically lets you get data out of the box dynamically as it's happening. You're getting these events. So in the case of Syslog, it's just about any event that's happening on the box, whether it's alarms or passed and failed authentications. In the case of pxGrid, it's actually going to give you session data. And this is what a lot of our security integrations use to understand who and what is coming on the network at any given time. So they can perform their security service for us. And then finally, we have REST and Data Connect. And these are really allowing you to see both configuration data as well as operational data. What you can see kind of varies between them. And I'm going to show you some examples of what those look like so you kind of understand the differences. But it's so many different ways of doing this stuff. And that's why I felt I kind of needed to show you what the possibilities are and how they're all different. The one big thing I also want to call out is really, if you look at it this way, uh, CSV, CLI, and Syslog, those are really your traditional network management ways of doing things, whereas pxGrid, REST, and Data Connect are much more programmatic in the way that they do things using REST APIs, WebSockets, and even an SQL ODBC connection that you have to then run queries and stuff. So those are sort of the different ways of doing it. I wanted you to understand what the different things are, maybe why you would want to use them, and kind of. So with that, let's jump into comma separated values. So I think everybody's probably really familiar with comma separated values. You've probably been using them for years. Uh, but there is one detail I want to call out when you start working with them. For simple table-based structures, CSV is awesome, right? As long as everything is in a very uniform, normalized table, it looks great, it works great. But when you start trying to represent hierarchical data, something like you see in a network device definition inside of ICE, right? Where you've got these authentication settings that are bundled together, and then you may have other things like RADIUS and TACACS that are bundled together. It starts to get really complicated when you want to go try and represent it over here. In fact, you can see when we do the network device groups, they've even done this funny little hashtag formatting for locations and how they do the hierarchy in locations. And then to separate them, they then have a vertical bar to separate that group from another group from another group. And so it gets really interesting, and you also sort of start to lose that hierarchical representation, right? So I just wanted you to be aware of that this can be challenging sometimes to understand the actual structure of the data in a CSV file. But with that, let's jump into ICE and let's see what we can do with CSVs. So the first thing I wanted to go call out was really let's take a look at our network device groups. And you have a hierarchy, right? You can see we have a bunch of different locations and things, and you can drill down and you can keep drilling down to all these other locations. And then you can finally get to like buildings and floors or however you want to hierarchically group it. If you want to go ahead and import things, I want to go ahead and do this for, let's say we have a network device groups for a university. So here, network device groups for university. Let's open that up. And it's basically going to do it by departments. So what you've been seeing before is I only had locations and device types. We're going to go ahead and import data for departments. And this is a really good way if you want to, especially if you have, tens or hundreds of these different things you want to import for your different locations around the world. This is one way to do it. And now we have the ability, okay, some of them already existed, so that's fine. I'll close that out. But you can see now we have our departments for our university. So that's one way to get it in. But obviously, if you want to get it out first, you can actually generate a template, and you can get that template and you open it up in Excel. And if you take a look, you can see the different columns. It's pretty straightforward. Maybe I did a little bit too much there. Let me back it off. And so what's really nice is it actually kind of tells you what to expect in terms of the maximum size. And in some cases, with network devices and other things, it will actually show you how to do. If I go to my network devices, it will export all. Bring this over. It actually shows you all kinds of columns, and there's just tons and tons of columns in this one compared to the other one, right? What's interesting is currently ICE shows you, and make this a little larger again. ICE shows you the shared secret for authentication, right? This is actually going to be changing in the next version of ICE and some of the newer patches. ICE 3.2, I believe patch 5, and ICE 3.4. We're going to be implementing encryption on these. So this is going to change. So just be aware of that when it does happen. But this is the way that we can kind of see what the different values are, what's expected, the size, and how you can track everything. And then also remember how I said that it does some interesting things with hierarchies, or if you have multiples, so you can actually have multiple IP addresses for a network device or multiple subnets. So it actually uses a hashtag as a separator here. You can kind of see that up there. So that's what it's trying to show you when you go ahead and do those imports and exports, if you're wondering how that works. So the other one I want to show you is around application configure ICE. And this also has to do with CSVs, but it's more specifically around endpoints, because endpoints is probably the number one thing that you care about in the ICE database, right? We're trying to track all the different endpoints and what we know about them. And if you go in by default in context visibility, you actually see 11 attributes that you can select to see about all of your endpoints in the table. But you can go ahead and select all. And when you do that, you actually have closer, I think it's 27 endpoint attributes that you can look at. So there's a lot more data there than you may be initially led to believe if you go ahead and select it all and see it. But then if you go ahead and actually export it out, first of all, in the import option, there's 31 columns. So there's an extra 4 columns that weren't there in that list. But if you export all the data out, you'll find there's actually 127 columns worth of data. And if you use this other utility I'm about to show you, the application configure ISE, you'll actually find there's 253 columns worth of data. And the reason for this is because there's a combination of both configured information about the endpoint, things we know, maybe what identity group or endpoint group it got set to. Maybe there's custom attributes, things that you've configured about that endpoint, descriptions, things like that. Then there's the operational side of things. Is it on the network right now? What's its status? When was the last time it was on the network? What's its posture? All these other different things that we're not necessarily showing in that table, but you still want to know everything about that endpoint. So to do it, you go in to application configure ISE on the command line on the CLI, and you enter option 16 to get all endpoints. It's going to export a report of all those attributes for every single endpoint it knows about in its database to the local disk. And then as a local disk, it is this local disk repository you can configure. And then once you simply down to this local disk management right here, and you'll be able to see the full report that you've exported right there. So I want to try and do that for you real quick. I forgot to open up a session. We'll just do it right here. Let's SSH into my box. And there we go. And let's run, if I can type, configure ISE. All right. And you can see option 16 is to get all endpoints. So it's going to start generating that report for us. I only have like 1,000, so it shouldn't take too long. But obviously, if you have tens of thousands or you have hundreds of thousands, it's going to take a while to dump all that data out. So with that, I shouldn't need to be there anymore. And I can come back into ISE. And if I go into my administration, maintenance, local disk, or ISE, there's my full report. And if I go ahead and I download that, there's my full report. And now I've got, it should be, that 253 columns. And you can see this is much, much bigger. There's some stuff I don't know, like MDM. This is a lot of MDM stuff. I can just blow that up and you can kind of see MDM, right, in the names. I'm not doing MDM on these, so there's nothing to show. But for other things, static assignment, AUP for guest assignment, lots of other interesting things, how it was authorized, device types, like it just keeps going, right? It just keeps going. So there's a lot of different things that can be tracked inside of here. So depending on what you're trying to know, this is a fantastic way to get data out of ISE. All right, so let's get back to our presentation. Syslogs. So there are a lot of different things you can do with Syslogs. The first thing to say is Syslogs is a whole protocol. It's not just a format. Part of it is kind of specifying the data that you're going to be sending, but also the way in which it gets sent and collected is also a part of it. So I think this is actually a great topic for a future session with Splunk, because as you may have heard, we just acquired Splunk, the deal closed. And so this is a really, really relevant topic for us right now. But to get started, I want to make it as simple as possible without getting into all this crazy syslog relay collector stuff. And just mention, in terms of setting things up in ISE, you have remote logging targets and logging categories. And so the way we do this is you just have to go in and modify these for the different remote logging targets that you want to send these things to. So I'm going to go ahead and show you how to do that right now. So in ISE, I have under logging, right now, I have some remote logging targets, and I actually want to add another one. The one I want to add is, I actually forgot to bring that up. I got to open my remote desktop to it right now. I'll go ahead and while it's coming up, I want to go into remote logging and I want to add it. And this is going to be, I'm actually going to be running 3C daemon, if you can believe it. I thought this was like the easiest, most basic thing to do. So we're going to do that. I believe it's on 36. And you have different options for how you want to be able to send this. We can actually do the good old-fashioned UDP syslog. We can do TCP syslog or secure syslog, where you secure it with TLS. So there's different ways depending upon what your capability of your syslog server is. This one's really old, running on a Windows machine. So we're just going to use the UDP syslog on standard port 514. And so we're going to do that. And it's going to tell us, are you sure it's not encrypted? Like, yeah, we're going to do it anyway. This is just a quick demo. So once that's done, let's see if I can bring up my, yeah, there it is. There it is. Okay, we don't want that. There we go. That's what we're looking for. 3C daemon. So we don't want the TFTP server. We actually want the syslog server. So you can see this has been sitting here running, waiting for syslog messages on this port and this IP address. So we're going to go back into ISE and we're going to configure it in our logging categories. If I were to go ahead and perform an authentication, it wouldn't actually receive anything right now because I haven't sent any of these interesting categories of messages to it as a target yet. So to do that, I have to click on each of these and find my new entry for my external syslog server, add it to the list, and now it will receive the AAA audit information when ISE has it. So we'll just go back and we'll do it a couple more times for the failed attempts. And again for past authentications. And this should be some good information for us to start seeing. So once we've done that, we can see that it's going to be sending any syslogs around AAA audits, failed attempts, past authentications. And you may want to do more of these. I just don't want to sit here and have you watch me click all these different pieces of information. There's a lot of different things. And also keep in mind, a lot of syslog servers, depending upon how they're licensed, they can be licensed by the number of sources, and they can be licensed by the number of events or the size of the data that you're ingesting. So you may want to filter and not send everything by default. You might want to be selective about how you do it. So that's one of the reasons why you have these options. So with that said, let's go ahead and let's perform an authentication. So I'm going to go my live logs. Let's see what's going on. We had some stuff going on in this box. I'm going to go ahead and turn on my Wi-Fi on my phone, see if I can perform an authentication real quick. And not coming up yet. There he is. All right. So Thomas just authenticated, and he's a trusted employee, so that's good. Now what we can do is head back over, and there it is in 3C daemon. You can see that we've got past authentications coming in. It was successful, and I know it's kind of hard to see in 3C daemon, but look at all the data in here, right? It actually, there's so much data, it had to send it over like 6 or 7 different log entries. And the syslog server can concatenate all these things together and keep all that rich data. But these are the kinds of things that are going to get sent out to the syslog server so that you can then correlate and do interesting things with them. I think one of the things I'm actually looking for in here, I don't see it, but it could be because it's just, there's just too much and it's scrolled off the page or it's somewhat hidden, is TLS. We get this question like, how do I see which of my clients are still using old TLS versions? And they need to know, can I turn off TLS 1.0, 1.1, or do I still have a few endpoints that are using those old versions, and where are they? Which ones are they, and where are they? Uh, so you can see that information individually in the ICE authentication details, but you should also be able to see it somewhere in here. I'm not seeing it, unfortunately, right now. Like I said, it looks like it's truncating some different things. But it probably should be inside of the syslog data. So if that's some of the stuff you're looking for, all that stuff should be saved off here in this audit log. So that's really cool. I'm going to go ahead and disconnect, and hopefully you should see, I don't know if there's going to be a session where it sends a disconnect for the session. We just did passed and failed. We didn't do accounting. So if you're interested in accounting, you would need to add that to this list as well. Yeah, it's not sending the accounting messages, so it's not there yet. All right, so that's Syslogs. And like I said, we just acquired Splunk. We're really excited about it. And I started digging into this, hoping that I could show you a lot more. And I realized there's no way I was going to show you all the things ICE and Splunk can do together in like 10 minutes for this webinar. So I punted on it. But do know that we do have integrations. We've had an integration for a very long time. We actually have like 4 of them. This is the oldest one, the main one that integrates with the Splunk Enterprise Edition. So if this is something you're looking to do, know that it's out there. Or you could just use good old-fashioned 3C daemon like I just did, right? Or whichever syslog server suits your needs. All right, so the next thing to cover is REST APIs. The reason this is interesting is because this is really the new programmatic way of doing things, right? To get data both out of ICE as well as into ICE for configuration and just being able to do queries and things. And this is something that we've documented on DevNet. So if you go to that shortcut URL, you can see everything we have. And the other thing I'll mention is there's this versioning page that I'm showing you on the right-hand side. We always get questions about, does my version of ICE support this capability with APIs yet? And this page will tell you that. So if you're ever wondering, can you do it? You can actually see all the minimum versions over here on the right-hand side for when certain APIs were first supported. So we've been doing REST APIs in ICE for well over a decade, since ICE 1.3. But we're always adding new ones to it as we add new capabilities, and we're starting to use the open APIs for that. And if this is something that interests you, you're wondering, yeah, I've been wanting to learn this, I'm not quite sure how to do it. We actually did a webinar previously back in 2022, and I covered how to do that using curl as a command line. And it goes through and shows you how to build a curl command, shows you a bunch of mistakes you can make and how to fix them. But it just goes through all this stuff for learning how to do this. So if you're not familiar with it, there is a resource for you. Go out there. I'm going to give you my GitHub links and everything. But that is how you can first learn doing it. And I actually prefer this over even Postman. It's because I can see everything. I know when I'm doing something wrong. And if somebody asks me to troubleshoot, I'm like, show me the command, right? Don't show me a screenshot. Show me the actual command that you're running, and I can help you troubleshoot it. So one of the things you can do if you want to try this out is you can actually don't go to the site, but you can use it. We've actually set up an always on DevNet sandbox for you with ICE. And if you use these commands, actually, these aren't commands, these are environment variables. And we're going to show you more about environment variables here in a little bit. But if you export these into your environment, you can then use them repeatedly with different ICE instances or different computers to do your REST API queries. And you can actually put all these commands into a shell file, and then you can just use the source command to load them. So you don't have to type all this stuff out every single time or copy and paste. You can actually just source it and it's already there and done. So that's typically how I do things. And once you have it that way, those environment variables can be used with a $sign to access them, and you can actually see them that way. And then you can use them in a curl command like this, where you can actually store your username, your password, and your ICE node. In this case, it's the primary pan to get something like the patch number, right? So with that, let's go do some REST APIs. All right, so what I want to show you is, I think I want to run it from this directory. We have a bunch of different things that we can run one of the first is that patch command. So let me just go ahead and like I save this stuff off into a little notebook and I can just run this command. So this is a curl command. This means if if the certificate is self-signed, it's okay. Just go ahead and trust it anyway. If there are redirections, follow it to the new location, follow redirects. You can see my terminal even tells you what those means. This is basically saying we want to accept JSON output. We're going to authenticate using the HTTP basic with username and password. And the request we're going to make is a GET request to this resource. And when we do that, if Thomas configured everything, I've been getting this curl could not resolve issue lately. I don't know why, but you can see that it did work. And my ISE version 3.3, and I'm using patch 1 to get that data out. So that's one thing you can do to query it for configuration information. But the main thing we want to get is probably monitoring data. So there's actually an M&T API inside of ISE. And for that, we can run a command like this, where it all looks the same. The only difference is that the M&T APIs are actually XML based, and they have a primary M&T and not the PAN. But we're going to get the number of active sessions, the active count. And so you can see that it outputs in XML, and we have a total of 187 endpoints in our ICE node right now and active sessions. So that's cool. What if we want to see them? Well, we have another command called active list, and I will paste that in here. And again, we're going to query the primary M&T node. We're going to ask for the active list instead of the active count. And when we do that, whoa, look at all that stuff. Lots of data, right? So not very pretty. So I have another tip for you. Whenever you get XML output like this, or even JSON, there's two utilities you can use. In this case, because it's XML, we're going to use something called XQ. It's basically XML query. And if you run that, check this out. Ah, isn't that so much nicer? It's all pretty and formatted and even colorized a little bit. So now we can see, looks like we've got some different sessions down here. Don't see, oh, there's that guy Thomas that just authenticated, right? So you can see all this information is in there. It's not highly detailed. So if you want to get that, you probably need to do some other queries. So what you could do is, well, this Thomas guy is on the network, so let's query for his specific username and see what we can learn about Thomas that way. So for this one, we're going to query for sessions by the username Thomas. We got some good info. Let's go ahead and let's run it through XQ again. Much better. So check this out. This is all about that one session for that one user, Thomas. There's a lot of good detail there. So these are all the different session parameters. It tells me if I passed or if I failed. And you can see it's true for passed and false for failed. It's way over here. But it's for Thomas at this IP address. And it just goes through almost pretty much everything that's in your live log. And remember, I was talking about that TLS thing earlier. So if I do a search on TLS, bam, there it is. So if somebody wants to know the TLS version, so it looks like my iPhone is using TLS version 1.2 to do this PEEP MS Chat v2 authentication. So this is one way you can gather that information if you're looking for a way to do some queries. Now, the downside is this is only good for active sessions. If I've disconnected, you're not going to get that level of detail. So that's one of the limitations of this API. If this is something, and if that's something that you'd like to be able to get through REST APIs, and you'd like it in JSON format instead of XML, I highly recommend that you submit an ICE wish to our PM so that they can improve this interface into this fantastic data in the ICE database. The other thing we can do is not just get data out from the M&T, but we can also get really good configuration data out. And for those of you that maybe are tired of looking at curl commands, I have another option for you. And one of them is a Python script that I wrote called IceGet. And so I'm going to run this, and we're going to run it on, we'll just do an endpoint group right now. And what this does is it very quickly goes out, queries the ICE node, and gets the JSON back that we would normally get. Now, what's different about this is if you have hundreds or thousands of things, it's going to get all of them by default. Normally, you have to do something called paging in ICE. And so if I want to get my endpoints, remember I said I had a couple hundred. If I want to get my endpoints, okay, it went off and got several hundred endpoints that actually have over 1,000. So we just got 1,000 endpoints that fast. If I want to get more information about those endpoints, or let's say I want to, this is nice, but it's a table, it's JSON, but it's not very readable. I actually want to see it in a table. I can do that really fast. In fact, I also know that there's more than just the ID and the MAC address for my endpoints. There's a lot of other details out there. But to do that requires a subsequent REST API query to get that data. But I've automated that for you by just simply adding a dash details option. So now when we run it, it's going to go off. It's going to query the like 1,000 something endpoints that we have. And hopefully it's going to come back fairly quickly. The reason I'm doing this is I want to show you how quickly this works because it's using asynchronous IO in Python to go back and get this data and then display it in a table. So if normally doing this, it would take probably half a second, quarter of a second to half a second for each and every query. I just did over 1,000 in a few seconds, and we can actually time it as well. I've got an option for that for you. But you can see all this data that we're getting back from the ICE endpoints in terms of the configuration data. But what's really fun, I'm going to go back to endpoint groups. And it's much smaller, so it's going to be much faster. Like I said, we can put it into a table. And if you want to know how many lines there are on the table, we can just pipe it through another Linux utility like word count, right? And now we can see the number of lines. So there's 37, probably -2 for the header. It's about 35 entries here. If I look at the table again, right, you can see I have my ID, my name, and my description. But I know there's more details there. So let's go ahead and get those. So now I have a little bit more detail, but now it's kind of scrolling. So let's get rid of the ID field. There we go. And if I go a little bit smaller, hopefully I can get it all to fit. You have to play around with it, right? But you get the idea that you can use a tool like this to do some very quick queries. And if you want to do something like this and just say, I want to grep and find where was Windows. I have Windows in there somewhere. Which one was it? I just need to know if it's in there. And boom, very quickly, you can get that group. And if you want the group ID, you don't even need to do that. You can just do that. And you get the same information. Now you have the group ID you can go use in another query or something. So these are some really interesting things. But there's one more thing you can do with this ICE get utility. You can do not just tables, but remember how we talked about CSVs? It does CSVs too. In fact, it also does YAML. So if you're doing Ansible and you want to take data out and convert it, you can put it into an Ansible format or a YAML format for Ansible. But that's not all. One more thing. I actually want to show you one more really cool option for the ICE get is here. Actually, I don't want to show you the code. I want to show you this. So if I do a command here, I'm going to copy and paste it in just so I get it right. I'm going to run this command. I'm going to run it against all of the available ICE resources that I can query. I'm going to do a dash V for verbosity or verbose. I want to show some status as I'm getting it. I want to output all the details into YAML files, and I want to save it into an ICE config directory. And that ICE config directory, um, I'm actually going to put under data. I don't want to clog this one. I'm going to put it under this data directory over here. So what I'm effectively doing is I'm going to query my ICE node. I'm gathering all this data using REST APIs. You can see I'm actually building out all these YAML files with my ICE configs right now. So if you want to basically capture your existing ICE configuration as a bunch of YAML files to go use it with Ansible or start playing with it, this will do it all for you. You can see that some of these things like profiles take a long time to query. That's just the way they are. It's not my script, but it will eventually go off, and it's getting details on all 837 of those. Probably not going to sit here and do all this, but I just wanted you to see that it's going to capture all this great information. And if you want to see my network devices, here are my network device definitions, right? So those are all, it captured them, and you can get this data out of ICE very easily using this command. So I love using these REST APIs. It can make things very, very fast to do it with these REST APIs. And again, by adapting it to Unix utilities or Linux utilities like this, it can make it more powerful to do simple queries or find out what's available. Or if you want to send somebody a CSV file, you can do that kind of stuff pretty easily. All right. So I think that's it for REST APIs for now. If you want to do more of this, go ahead and you can learn how to do it using this ICE ERS example API page. This is something in our community. Hopefully you can go through and understand how to do all this very easily. If you want to see how to use those monitoring API commands that I was just showing you, including the XQ utility to pretty print it, that's available for you as well. And when it comes to those monitoring API examples, this is a quick summary of what's available out there. It's also in that document, so don't worry about trying to write all these down right now. But just be aware that it does require super admin, system admin, or MNT admin privileges. This is different than the normal ICE REST APIs, right? So just make sure your user, if you're not a super admin in your ICE, when you query the MNT node, you have to be one of these group members in ICE in order to do the query. The other thing is I really struggled for a while to understand what is the time format that I'm supposed to be using. And what I realized is I was using just a normal space in the URL, and that wasn't working. You actually need to URL encode it from a normal space character to %20. So just type in %20 instead of a space in between the date and the time that you want to use, and the queries will work great. So that was something I wanted to make sure you knew because I struggled with it for a while. So that's a little tip for you. And if you liked that ICE get script that you just saw, you can download it from my GitHub repository. You can either download the whole thing and use it, or you can just get the source of that one file and use it to your heart's content, modify it, do whatever you want with it. So that's some of those resources available from what you just saw. So Platform Exchange Grid, pxGrid. All right. So what you just saw was me running a bunch of scripts, and it's basically doing polling where we're getting requests, right? And one of the things is if you're having to constantly poll to find out if an event happened, you're going to be missing things along the way, or you're gonna spend CPU cycles trying to get data that isn't there yet. So you're going to have these misses, right? Or if you don't poll often enough, stuff can happen and you miss it. And then when you poll, you're like, oh my God, all this stuff just happened. So that's the problem with synchronous or timed polling. Whereas the other way you can do things is with asynchronous events. And so when an event happens, it just gets sent to you. And this is typically how WebSockets work, right? So no matter how fast or slow they happen, you're going to get an event delivered to you immediately. And that's really the purpose of pxGrid, is when you subscribe, you get those events as they happen, and you can get information like the ICE session data. So here we have this data with all that information, similar to what you saw earlier, right? In terms of the authentication requests, you can actually go in and get this information, and now you can use it programmatically to be notified that somebody just came on the network. Their name was Thomas at this MAC address, at this IP address, with this security group tag, and you can do interesting things with it. So the other thing to note about this is you can do it with password authentication or certificate-based authentication. We actually recommend that you do it with a certificate, but really quick, just to show you scripting to make it, because some people are really afraid of certificates, I wanted to show you with the password. And we also have the ability to do this really quick. I'm just going to do a little demo for you to show you how to enable it. So we have these things are all running on this one node. I have pxGrid already enabled. So to get this working, we're going to need an Advantage license, first of all. And if you go into pxGrid services settings, let's turn on the ability to create a password-based account. Then we're going to see that we don't have a client created yet. So we're going to go do that right now. So the first thing we do is we're going to get a pxGrid util. This is a Python package created by some of our developers. So you can just install it from the command line and then use Python. Always like to create a Python environment first so we don't mess up the rest of our computer with all these different packages we're installing. But we're going to install pxGrid util inside of this environment. That fast. And now we want to go ahead and invoke our shell that has that package installed in it. And I just launched this part of my terminal. What we're going to do now is we're going to source our secrets from that has our environment variables with our secrets in it, so we can use the username and password. And you can see here's my pxGrid username and password and client information. So I do have to change it, and that's why it's set to change me right now. It's my little reminder. So we're going to ask pxGrid to create an account for us with the username pxGrid client. And so this is the URL to create an account. So go ahead and use that with curl. And it's saying a node name. It's actually a username and a node name. We come back, we got a 200, which is great. You can see it gave us the node name pxGrid client. pxGrid client's our username. And also there's our password. So it dynamically it generated this random password for us to use for this account. So now I need to update my environment variable for my password to use this password in my script. As you can see, I've had some other ones in the past. So now that that's set, I can go ahead and I can run some pxGrid util scripts. But first, I have to activate my account. So I've got my password. I have to activate my account. And I'm going to put a little description in there so the person approving it knows that it's for the webinar demo. Again, that was successful. And you can see my account state is pending. This means I actually have to go back into the ICE UI. If I refresh, you can now see it sitting there. And so there's always going to be this UI approval for a password account. So we have to go in, just simply check it, approve it, and now we're good. So once we've done that, we can go into our environment, and for pxGrid util over here, the way we left it, I can now run some commands to see what's out there. So you also have the ability to do, you can actually do REST API queries. First thing I want to see, do I have the authorization to get the session directory? So let's go ahead and do that. And the answer is that command worked. And yes, I am permitted to get the session directory. So that's great, because what I want to do is I want to see what are all the active sessions running right now on ICE. So I can not only get asynchronous data, but I can actually query it. So I'm going to query all the existing sessions on ICE right now, and there they are. So you can see Thomas was the last guy to authenticate, and you can see the details about his session. And what I want to do now is, and by the way, it's not just that one, like there's a lot of sessions, right? We kind of went through. So there's a lot in there. It's not just the one session from Thomas, it's everything. So we queried all the sessions. The next thing I want to do is I want to go ahead and subscribe. And so for this one, I'm using these long commands just so you can kind of see everything. But basically, this px subscribe command uses the host name we're talking to, what's the username, what's the password, don't care about self-signed certificates, and I want to go ahead and subscribe to the session topic called, or the ICE session service with the session topic. So when I do this, nothing's going to happen. Not very exciting. And the reason why is because there's no events happening. There's no authentications going on in the background. But if there were, we'd be seeing these events. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to go back to my phone. I'm going to authenticate. And hopefully within a few seconds, boom, there it is. Okay. So we got a new sequence. And looks like we only have the one. Thomas came in, Peep authenticated. He was assigned the security group employees. We don't know his profile yet, but he was assigned this IP address, and he's coming in on wireless. And if we go look down here, you can see the SSID. It's the corporate SSID, and the session was started. So that's really cool. In fact, I'm going to now disconnect from my wireless session. And right away, you can see I got disconnected. This event came across immediately in pxGrid. So now you can see the sequence was updated. It still has all the other information, but I've been now disconnected from the session. So that's how you can get session data dynamically in real time out of ICE for all the endpoints and users coming into your network. All right. So with that, I wanted to let you know you can get this stuff from the Python advanced examples in the official Cisco pxGrid GitHub account. They have all these things. If you go there, scroll down, you can see the advanced examples. They have excellent descriptions on how to run these utilities like I just did. So I think it's really cool, and that's why I wanted to share it with you today, because it really helps solve some use cases with that asynchronous connectivity. All right, we already saw the demo for the sessions. Data Connect, last thing. This one is really cool. This solves a huge problem, and that is that for years we've had these static reports inside of ICE that are not very flexible. You can't really do custom queries. It's really annoying. And I kept telling the product managers, just give me an SQL interface to the database and let me do my own queries. And that's what Data Connect is. So you can connect any ODBC client into ICE to the MNT node, and you can run queries against read-only views of the database, the raw ICE database. It's awesome. Again, read-only, and there's a limited number of views. You can't see everything in there, but you do have access to these things. It's great. So what can you see? A lot of stuff. So we have all these different tables that are read-only views, and you're able to get information out and run queries and do SQL joins and all this stuff with these things. So the other thing I'll mention is with the script that I'm doing, we don't have access to these things. There's something about a time zone attribute, the format. It doesn't like it when I'm using the thin client. I'm going to show you what that looks like here in a bit. And the data connect tables. Oh, sorry. If you don't see what you need in terms of a table view, if you don't see the data you're looking for that you're expecting, please submit an ICE wish to our product managers and let them know that this is a fantastic feature, but you want more. You want to see more data, right? More data is always better, in my opinion. So if you see something, just ask for it. Then, if you want to know how to use it, there's a lot of crazy SQL queries you can do with these things, and our developers have already documented a lot of them. So if you want to see how to do these different queries, nodes, identity stores, failure reasons, you can actually do table joins and see summaries of network devices, which one had certain failures, or users that had failures, or endpoints that had failures. It's incredible what you can do with this thing. If you want to enable it, there's also an API to turn it on. And I wrote a little script for you guys. Again, it's in my ICE Python scripts. It's documented how to get started with it. It's all there for you. And specifically, what we're looking for is this script called IceQL. What I wanted to do is be able to, again, do it programmatically on a command line without having to do a big ODBC client installation and all this other garbage. So I did it with a really quick little Python script, thanks to one of the Oracle Python packages. It's really nice and lightweight. You don't have to worry about installing ODBC clients or paying somebody for their ODBC client. When I started doing this, I just ran into so many problems with ODBC clients and all the different libraries and packages and trials and everything. It's just way too much work. This was easy. So I want to show you how easy this is. What I do is I go to my CLI and we're going to use my Python scripts, clear this out, and IceQL. So it's a Python script. Really simple. So if you want to know how to use it, all you got to do is do that with -h or --help. And it gives you some examples. So it's going to remind you of the environment variables that are needed to connect to your specific ICE primary M&T, and you are going to need a data connect password. So you're going to have to populate it in here with whatever you use when you turned it on. But it has all of these queries ready to go for you to play with. So I'm just going to take this first one, and it goes something like this. So IceQL, and you just put it in double quotes because it's got spaces and things in there. This command is going to, this is an SQL query. It's going to select views from this database table. It's going to sort it by the view name in ascending order. There you go. So these are all the tables that you saw in that previous slide, right? I was showing you all the things that are available. And now if you want to check on something like, let's see, radius accounting, show me, copy that. And I'm just going to come back in here, and I don't need to worry about sorting just yet. I'm going to see all of the columns from radius accounting. Okay, so look at all the data coming through, and I know it's not very pretty. There's a lot of data out there, but we got a lot of authentications, right? Accounting data. So you can see tons of data coming back from this. So this is where you're going to want to run some different queries. And this is why it's helpful to kind of see what's available and go, well, maybe I don't want to see all that. Maybe I want to only see certain fields. I want to select certain attributes from certain fields on certain tables. And oh, yeah, you got to actually put that in a SQL query, Thomas. I got so excited, I forgot to put it in here. Look at that, right? So we're now selecting certain fields of data for our different people to see if they're an admin and if their password expires, for example. So really cool things you can start to filter on. And then again, you can start to join tables together to do interesting queries. And if you go to our Data Connect page, like I was telling you about, There's a list of the database views, and they've documented all the fields for you here, so you don't have to do it via the command line like I was showing you. But if you just scroll down, you can see all the different fields available, and they actually have some guides. And if you want to run some of these queries, like let's say authentications by location, they've got the whole SQL query here for you. So I can just copy it right there. And if I go back into my command line, I can paste it in. So our developers have done a lot of the hard work for you to get started. So crazy SQL query, right? But it works. Oh no, what happened? Um, well, it is SQL, but for some reason I found that Oracle doesn't like, when I do the query, it doesn't like the semicolon on the end. So just get rid of the semicolon. Ta-da! Look at that. Really, really cool. You can see a summary of all the authentications on this deployment by location. So really, really cool to get that information. And again, you can totally customize this any way you want. So hopefully you guys find that useful. And I know I'm very excited about it. I do want to show you real quick in the last minute. Um, this script is really small. IceQL, when I was trying to figure this out, like this is it. All that runs all those SQL queries. So the power is in this Oracle database uh, Python package. They make it really easy to connect and query. This is called a thin client. You don't have this big heavyweight ODBC client. So far, the only limitations I found is with parsing the time zone and timestamps for some of those tables, but otherwise it works fantastically as you saw. So hopefully you enjoy this. You're going to get some really good reports out of ICE. And again, this is just showing you how to do it on a command line. You can take this and you can run all kinds of queries, export it in HTML, PDF, whatever way you want to get access to this for your organization, whatever your needs are. So if you know SQL, you can do lots of great stuff. So there you go. Finally, want to remind you we have an open beta coming up. I told you that's coming up in June. Actually, it's open right now. The webinar is coming out in June, so you'll learn about the specific features. If you just want to tune in and see them then, you can do that. Otherwise, sign up for the beta. We have a licensing program for you. If you're still on ICE 2.x, you're running out of time. You're going to have a last day of support on that is coming up in September, so you need to start thinking about migrating if you haven't already. We have a program for you for that. And I want to remind you, we have a survey coming up. Let us know how we did. If there are more things you want to see with Data Connect or pxGrid or other things, let us know what you'd like to see. And I have lots of resources for you here. We also have more resources that you can refer to for all the things we've talked about today. So I don't think we have any time for questions, Rigo, but if there is one, I'll take it.
Awesome. Thank you, Thomas. Actually, I was just looking at our questions panel, and it looks like our panelists have already addressed all the outstanding questions. So I think we're good to go.
All right. Well, thank you then.
All right. Well, I just want to give you a big thanks, Thomas, for speaking about this topic with our audience today. I hope that everyone found great value in the information and resources that we share here. I would also like to extend a very big thank you to each and every one of our panelists for lending a hand with the questions throughout the webinar. We really appreciate it. And for our attendees, if you do have any additional questions or would like to continue the conversation about today's topic, we do encourage you to participate in our online post-webinar discussion. You are going to be redirected there upon exit, but I'm going to be posting the link into the chat window just in case you'd like to bookmark it and refer to it at a later time. So we do look forward to your participation. And just a quick reminder to our attendees, as Thomas mentioned, that we are going to get a pop-up survey as soon as you exit the webinar, and we would be so grateful if you can just take a few minutes to complete it and let us know how you like today's presentation. We always look forward to receiving your valuable feedback. And for those who may be interested in revisiting this session, we will have the recording available for on-demand viewing within approximately 5 business days after today. And the link has been posted into the chat window there for your reference. But just in case you missed it, I'm going to go ahead and repost it again in just a moment. And lastly, I just want to remind everybody of the upcoming webinars. So next month, we're going to be covering ICE Posture Compliance Part 1. That's going to be on Tuesday, May 7th. And also in the month of June, we're going to be hosting What's New in ICE 3.4, and that'll be on Thursday, June 20th. Registration for June session will be coming soon. However, if your time permits, we do invite you to join us and register for May's webinar if you haven't done so already. So I'm going to go ahead and repost the link into the chat window right now, and we look forward to seeing you all there next month and in June session as well. Thanks again to our presenter, to our panelists, and to all of our attendees for joining us here live. I hope that you enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you so much.